The last 2 years has been emotionally and mentally, like, I'm still trying to find my footing. And I think that's the part of cancer that many people don't get to see. You see when patients lose their hair, you see when they're not feeling well.
Day in the life of a cancer patient. As of yesterday, I can't swallow. It hurts like you wouldn't even believe. Not a strep throat type of hurt, but like it feels like you're swallowing a big chunk of bread without water, and it hurts going down. And when it hits, finally goes from your esophagus to your stomach, it feels terrible.
You don't see the depression. You don't see the anxiety. You don't see the, oh gosh, I have a cold. Now they want to do another scan. Yes, in remission, but maybe not. I am Antoinette. I was diagnosed with gastric malt lymphoma, and I am a proud resident of what we call the DMV area, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, in particular, Maryland. Man, treatment tribe, day 3. I got that one and that one. I was in some pain this morning. A lot of pain, actually. Nausea isn't as bad as it was on day 1, but I'm ready for this to be over. One of the symptoms I was experiencing was significant night sweats. I mean, I'm talking about to the point where I went to my gynecologist like, hey, I don't think I'm there yet, but could I maybe be there? Am I peri or premenopause, or because this isn't making sense? The sweating went on for some years, actually. To include, she's like, oh, maybe you're just a hot sleeper. I mean, I got a cooling mattress, which was wildly expensive. I got cooling sheets. I got all these things like, oh, okay, we did all these tests and nothing's wrong. Gastroenterologically, I was just having gastro symptoms that didn't make any sense. Even the years that I spent being vegetarian, to include just severe bloating, to include, despite me being active, physically active, I work out quite a bit. I wasn't able to eliminate the way that you should when you eat clean. Like, I don't eat pork. I hardly eat fried food, things like that. If I go to a drive through, it's few and far in between. So I have a pretty clean diet, but the gastro symptoms weren't making sense. And then when I was able to eliminate, after I eliminated, I would look like I'm 5 months pregnant, which, like, none of this makes sense. And I cut out different things in my diet. Like, okay, let me just stop with white sugar. Let me do like a coconut type of sugar that's low glycemic. All these things that you try to, okay, let's see if it's a lifestyle issue. Let's see if I just have gut sensitivity. And again, this all went on for literally years. Finally, I went to the gastroenterologist. I said, look, something's wrong. And so we did a SITS marker test. At the end of the SITS marker test, at the end of the 5 days, I still had 3 markers left. I went back for a follow-up appointment. I was like, well, why would I have 3 markers left? And she says, oh, some people just have a slow moving colon. I was like, no, the researcher in me says no, everything has a root cause. Why would I have a slow moving colon despite me not having any lifestyle issues? I don't have any dieting issues. I don't, there has to be a reasonable explanation. So she said, well, we could do, so we were scheduled to do a SIBO test. The kit arrived. She said, well, we can also do a colonoscopy. And I said, well, what will a colonoscopy show you? She says, oh, it'll show us everything. It'll show us if you have any polyps. It'll show if you have Crohn's disease, diverticulitis. I was like, oh God, well then please, let's do that. I called my family doctor and said, listen, I had a colonoscopy back on, I think it was like December 22nd or 20th. I said, and it's now January, it's weeks later. And they're saying that Hopkins is not returning their phone calls, which I highly doubt that. Like, I just don't believe that. I was like, will you please help me get my results? I'll never forget the street I was on. I will never forget it. And I answer, and she says, hey. I said, hey. She says, oh, you're driving. I'll call you back. I said, nope. What you got? And so she was like, are you sure? I said, I am positive. Just tell me whatever you need to tell me. And she said, well, how long is it going to be until you get home? I said, maybe about another 15 minutes. She's like, are you sure you don't want me to just call you back? I said, so at that point, I knew it was something bad. I said, no. So she said, well, let me ask you something. What has your gastroenterologist told you at all? I said, she hasn't told me anything. I said, that's why I had to ask you to help me because you're a part of Hopkins. And if they're saying that Hopkins isn't returning their phone call, then, you're already a part of the Hopkins network. You'll be able to see everything. And she said, She said, well, I'm going to tell you because you just want me to tell you. I won't dance around it. She said, unfortunately, I have a form of lymphoma. It is gastric malt lymphoma. She said, I've never heard of it myself, if I'm going to be honest with you. She said, so I went on to, they basically have an intranet. She said, I went on our intranet to research it, and she gave me what the acronym means for malt. And she said, I am not in a position to discuss it with you because that's not my expertise. And I don't want to misspeak. She said, but I've already put in the referral with oncology. They'll reach out to you today or tomorrow. And she said, Antoinette, I'm just so sorry. I am so sorry. And I was numb. I remember getting home and I sat in the car for a little bit, like I couldn't move. I just sat in the car. I was able to finally grab my briefcase, my purse, my keys, come in the house, and I just sat on the floor. I just sat on the floor. But then I started having flooded thoughts of my kids. And oh my God, how am I going to tell my parents this? How am I going to tell my family? And, you know, but I remember even what I had on. Like, I was just numb. I don't think anyone thought it was cancer, right? Yeah, I certainly didn't think so. I had no idea what was wrong, but I certainly didn't think the colonoscopy would come back with, you don't just have cancer, but you have a rare cancer. I wouldn't have thought that. Unfortunately, at the same time that I was diagnosed on January 31st, we had been informed just 2 weeks prior to that my father only had 2 weeks left to live due to cancer. So I was diagnosed on January 31st. My father passed on March the 7th from cancer. So as you can imagine, with us already, you know, my father fought hard for 18 months. When he was diagnosed terminally. As we're preparing to bury my father, and I was the one driving 3 hours away to take my dad to all of his appointments and etc. So to hear that, I guess if you would, the pillar of strength that had been there to carry him through his treatment and through his battle, to hear that I now have cancer. When I went to see medical oncology, he was using the verbiage of we can watch it, we can monitor, etc. And I was like, I am not understanding. Like, why would we watch it and monitor it instead of like? And he's like, it's up to you whether or not you want to treat it. I'm not sure I'm following. Like, why would I monitor it? Why would I? And that's when he mentioned, well, this is a type of cancer that there's no cure. You can only treat it. And I remember looking at him and looking at the resident and saying, well, this was a waste of my time. Because if I'm here talking to you today about just treating it and not curing it, and all we can do is, I was like, I'm not real sure. So I left that appointment frustrated and defeated. That same oncologist, medical oncologist that initially told me weeks prior in his office that there was no cure. I answered the phone. He says, we got back all the results, et cetera, et cetera. I want to let you know, if you want to go ahead and do oncology, it looks like your staging is 1E. And so I asked, well, what's 1 and what's the E, And he said, if you want to go ahead and get rid of it, we can get you scheduled for the radiation and get rid of it. I said, wait, what did you just say? Because again, my life at this point is kind of a blur. I just buried my dad, So I wanted to make sure I heard him correctly because I left that last appointment with him where I was clear that this cancer can't be cured, it can only be treated. And he said, I said, can you say that again? He says, yeah, if you want to do the radiation, we're confident in the 12 rounds of radiation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It should get rid of it. I said, yeah, but in your office recently, because again, I just need to, I said, in your office recently, you told me that there's no cure. This can only be treated. You just told me that. And he says, well, yeah, I mean, but with it being 1E, we can do the radiation and get rid of it. Or if you want to think about it, because I know how you feel. And I said, well, yeah, give me the day to think about it. I was like, but, and so we talked about options. Like, okay, if I decided not to treat it, what would happen if I let it get to 2 or 3, or God forbid, I know what, 4 means. And he explained then if it got to 2, or if or even at 1 and started to metastasize, then my only option would be chemoimmunotherapy. I am grateful to be here at Johns Hopkins, but on the same page, I'm tired of coming here. It just kind of just makes it real. It was awful, actually. So I was scheduled to do 12 rounds, 2 units per session. I had to go every day. After the third session, I was just having significant abdominal pain. And I've had 2 children. When I tell you the pain was like giving birth, it was awful. So I went ahead and went to the fourth because naturally it's radiation. So I wasn't expecting for it to be a walk in the park, but so finally by day 4 I said something. I was like, "Hey, I've been in a lot of pain." And just overall I didn't feel well. Day 4. And the stomach pain is pretty bad. My little fuzzy socks. So let's go in here. We could do what it do. I didn't look good. I didn't feel good, and so the oncologist called and he's like, "Hey, you've been having stomach pain." I was like, "It's more than stomach pain. It feels like," and he's like, let's maybe take a break for a couple of days. Don't come Friday. Don't come Monday. Let's take a break. Maybe your body, is just trying to adjust to it, which I felt was fair. And let's reconvene on Tuesday. Okay. So Tuesday I was feeling better. The pain went away. I'm like, oh, okay. So we were able to do the sessions again. He said, as well as I'll reduce the dosage from 2 to 1.5. It is not going well. So the doctor just called and said, hey, we're going to pause radiation because we don't know why you're having the side effects you're having. I was supposed to have 7 more to go. So yeah, lots of pain. The pain is indescribable. It feels like contractions for those of us that have had children. And that is atypical, using his words. I was supposed to have 24 total units. I think we got to about 16 and a half. I said, well, what's the probability of that being enough? And he said, well, there's been enough studies to show that with other malt lymphomas, that people can even have single digit treatments, and they've been sufficient. There's just not enough research to support single digit number of treatments for gastric malt lymphoma. He said, but I'm sure that the research will come and will say we actually didn't need to even do 12 treatments with you. We probably could have done 4 or 5. And I trusted him. Nothing's guaranteed. But when he felt confident that the 16 and a half was sufficient and that he was more concerned about what my life would look like afterward, that made me feel that much more secure. The treatment was bad, but I was humbled at that it could have been worse. And that a lot of people have it worse. And that some people, including even my dad, they don't make it, So I'm grateful. I'm really, really grateful that the 16 and a half units was sufficient. I'm grateful that I've had a great medical team. I recite gratitude every day. Of course, I pray every day. I pray a lot. I know sometimes God be like, "You again? You again?" Um, but gratitude is what helped keep me sane during this entire ordeal. The machine that I had to use. So there's a series of appointments as well leading up to the radiation, because you have to hold your breath while you get the treatment, while the machine is going around your body. And there's all this science and all these engineers behind setting you up for the treatment and setting the right beam to the right area. I mean, it's really cool. Um, and so while I would be there for my treatment, you have to breathe regular, and then they'll tell you, okay, we're going to stop your breathing now. And they literally stop your breathing. Like, you can't breathe if you wanted to. And I remember one of the technicians came out. He said, you have really long breath strides. And I was like, yeah. He says, yeah, some of the longest we've seen. And we use the machine, every day. And I was like, well, I said, perhaps that's the meditation. And he says, that's what it is. I was like, yeah, I meditate every day. I was so happy when I got back to ring the bell. My treatment team was there, and I was able to see them, and they cried. I cried. We're in the hallway. Everybody's crying, and people are walking by. It was a mess, but a good mess, a good positive mess. What I recently found for myself was survivor's guilt, survivor's remorse. And that's something I'm dealing with. But again, I just stay in gratitude with that. And I use that as my power and as my armor to do things like this, to spread the awareness. I'm starting a nonprofit foundation for Black women and cancer. Of course, it's open to all women, but in particular, those that have a more disparate impact. I've also started a line of merchandise because, again, one of the things that I started that I had to say to myself during this journey was I have to have positive language. And somebody was like, "Oh, you're fighting cancer," and I was like, "No, that feels so heavy. That feels so negative. Fighting is negative. It feels heavy. It's too much for me to carry." And I was like, "No, I'm conquering cancer. It feels empowered. It feels empowering." So I have a line of merchandise for cancer patients that say "Cancer Conqueror." And then even for the people that were taking me to treatment, again, I didn't want to feel needy. I didn't want to feel handicapped. I didn't want to feel, no, I was like, no, you guys are my treatment tribe. You're my treatment tribe. The people that bought me food, the people that sent flowers. I mean, I got so much love from people that I don't even like. They don't even have my phone number, but they know me or know of me. Today's treatment tribe featuring Asha, mom, treatment number 6. The last 2 years has been emotionally and mentally, like, I'm still trying to find my footing. And I think that's the part of cancer that many people don't get to see. You see when patients lose their hair, you see when they're not feeling well, but you don't see the depression, you don't see the anxiety, you don't see the, oh gosh, I have a cold. Now they want to do another scan. Yes, in remission, but maybe not. Um, you don't see the feelings of isolation, because yeah, you can have what I've now affectionately called my treatment tribe, because I had to go to treatment every day. You can have those people, but you're really in it alone. It's you and God, especially when you have a rare cancer. Despite my diagnosis, I still went to work every day. That is the only thing I regret, that I should have taken that time to take care of myself. We agreed that I would see him once a year. but then the night sweats were back. So he's like, I want you to see medical oncology. And I'm like, medical oncology can only do one thing for me, and I don't want to do that, which is chemoimmunotherapy. And so, but of course, but again, I said, but I trust you. So if you feel like you want me to go back to see medical oncology, I will do that because I trust you and I trust your expertise. You haven't steered me wrong yet. And so I agreed. Those same spots have been there. They haven't grown in size. They haven't changed shape. And so, maybe those are just two areas that will just always be kind of hot spots in my body. Maybe that's just my body's anatomy. Because for 2 years and all these CT, PT scans with contrast, they haven't changed. We did a ton of lab work. All the labs were clear. I will see medical oncology in 6 months, and then 6 months from there, I'll see radiation oncology. And so I've accepted, I guess, if you will, my fate. I've accepted that this is just what it is, but they know. So I'm not a hypochondriac. But again, how I got here is because I know my body. Something's not right here. I don't take any supplements. I'm not on any medication. There was nothing else to point to the why. Like, why would I be having these gastro issues? It's not a lifestyle issue. It's not a supplement issue. It's not a medication issue. It's not, there was no other reasonable explanation. And so with that said, they know I'm the first one to advocate for myself. And so if something starts to feel like it's going awry, I'll be the first one to say, guys, we might have a problem here. My immune system now is not as strong. I have never had so many colds over the last 2 years that I've had in my life. But what's interesting though, is, I had this conversation with both medical oncology and radiation oncology, and they both mentioned the same thing, that normally people with radiation, and certainly the low dosage that I had, they normally don't experience, compromised immune systems. Of course, during the time of treatment, sure, maybe, but not 2 years removed. And I'm like, well, I did have a rare cancer, so there you go. I'm grateful to be a part of any research and information that Hopkins can get and give, to the cancer community, to help them, to just help people have increased survivorship. Really, do what brings you joy, not happiness. Happiness is a fleeting emotion, but do what feels good to your soul. Live your life by design. If you know you have no desire to commute to work every day, well, then, I don't know, build you a business or hire a driver, right? I mean, that can look a number of different ways, right? Live your life by design, because I think that in that, you'll have an inherent level of joy. But do what feels good to your soul. Do what brings you joy. Pay attention to your body. Get healthy, stay healthy, because when you're healthy, when you get healthy and you stay healthy and you stay active and you have a good diet, when you do come across health issues, they're easier to find and easier to explain. Advocate for yourself. Ask the hard questions, because yes, as I told my oncologist, you may be the oncologist, you may be a Hopkins oncologist, but this is my life and this is my body. So we're partners in this. We're partners. And that is also why me as a patient, I have to treat him like he's a human too. Be nice. Be good to your providers. And I'm fairly confident they'll be good to you too, right? As we like to say in the South, you get more bees with honey than vinegar.